Hey, welcome back to another episode of DDG live streams. We couldn't find Sarah. Sarah, I guess, fell asleep because it's late. So we're here with Chay. Good morning, Chay.
Morning, guys. Hey.
Chay is gonna take us through the, how did we call it, the NATO lane of embarrassment in Moscow. Take it over, Chay.
Yeah, well, hey, everybody. Great to see you all. Hello from Moscow. It's a beautifully sunny day. It's cold today, hence my warmer army jacket that I have, which I use when I'm in colder places, let's say. So, huge display. There's, dozens of vehicles here. But what first greets you when you walk through the very large sort of entrance, so security checks. Sorry, I can't flip the camera, so I'm going to have to be a bit innovative. This is very interesting. Have a look. It actually says the writing in Russian on the top, the red lettering. It actually says history repeats itself. Historia повторится, which means history repeats. And underneath that tarpaulin, you can see a Marder anti-tank gun from the Second World War, captured by the Russian military. You can have a look there with the Haken Cruise on it. And right beside it, guys, you can see a Marder 1A3 German infantry fighting vehicle. And I suppose one of the first things that you notice when you get up close to these things is, as you can see, the German flag. They put a flag of the country of origin on every one of the vehicles here. The first thing that strikes you when you get up close to them is how old they are. A lot of this equipment is old. It looks old. And it kind of feeds into the narrative that NATO has dumped a lot of stuff into Ukraine. But the Marder 1A3, again, was billed as, of course, a game changer. And you can see on the running wheels here, a lot of shrapnel damage. As you can see, a lot of damage. But you can see how old these machines are. This isn't new material by any stretch of the imagination. Quite compact. And the main armament on the Marder is, I think, a 30mm cannon. No point in me showing you the spec sheet, if you like, which is on every vehicle, because it's all in Russian. There's a quick overview of it here. See, quite a bit of damage. And here's the rear sort of exiting compartment as well. Now, very close by, very close by, right beside the Marder, is another piece of German equipment, as you can see. And this is really one of the stars of the show, really, I suppose. The Leopard. And this particular model is a Leopard 2A6, so it's quite an advanced Leopard tank, widely considered to be one of the best tanks of the world. That was before the second phase, if you like, of the conflict in Ukraine, when the Russian military intervened in 22. Because like much of this kit and equipment here, the Leopard 2A6 hadn't really been challenged in combat against a peer adversary. It had never actually been, as far as I know, in real terms challenged. And it met its first challenge when it met the Russians in Ukraine.
Shay, for a second, I'll put up the famous tweet from the defense of Ukraine.
Release the Leopards.
Release the Leopards.
Yeah, well, the Leopards were released and they were captured, as you can see. We got a young Russian soldier. You can see he's given a little discussion about how these were captured. I'm not sure if he's one of the boys that actually did the capturing, but he's an expert in the Leopard tank. He's obviously a decorated veteran of the SMO, because you can see that on his chest as he gives his talk, Paruski, to the gathered veterans and media and people who've come along, ordinary Russians. You can see with the 2A6, there's quite a bulky projection of armor on the front. The first Leopards, the Leopard 1, basically, was quite a basic tank developed just in the post-war period. But this is basically the 6th evolution of the tank with significant armor on it. Of course, you can see the anti-RPG, or it's not an anti-drone grill, it's an anti-RPG grill fixed to the side of the turret. And of course, prior to the arrival of the FPV drone, which evolved in this conflict, this would have been designed to protect the turret, the vulnerable parts of the turret, from an RPG. And we've seen similar types of protection on Merkava tanks in Gaza. And we've seen first-person video from the resistance fighters there attacking Merkava tanks, and they usually try to get their hull main charges under the gap between the turret and the body of the tank. And you can see the thickness of the armor here if I bring you up close. Some of this is reactive armor, so it'll be explosive reactive armor. These box-like structures you see on the side of the tank would explode in reaction to a charge coming in an RPG usually, or an anti-tank weapon. I'm not sure how this Leopard was destroyed or how it was damaged. There's some smoke damage on the turret, but you can see the size of the gun, and you can see shrapnel damage on the gun as well, which suggests that it may have hit a mine, but it's not detracked. You can see the running gears in perfect order on the tank as well. Smoke discharges on the back of the turret. The turret is huge. It's long, and it's very, very sort of sleek looking. And funnily, you wouldn't imagine it, but for the driver, a little wing mirror like you used to have on your bike as well. So this is our friend here. Здравствуйте. Я ирландский журналист. Ирландия. Это твой трофей? Нет. Ага. I'm from Ireland. I'm doing a live TV. So I asked him, was it his? Did he destroy the tank? He said no. You know, maybe with a few beers he'd tell us different. But let's have a look at the rear of it. As you can see, the turret projecting. There's a huge gap underneath the turret, as you can see, which is vulnerable, really. I think that's an area that the boys tried to target. And on the top, you can see the big fans for the engine, the big extractors, very similar to a Tiger tank. And the Tiger would have influenced a lot of the engineering ideology, if you like, around the Leopard. Of course, the Tiger being one of the most powerful and successful tanks. Second World War. Just bring around the back of the Leopard. And as you can see, this is a very advanced weapon. It's a very advanced weapon system. You can see the large scale gauge of the tracks as well. So this is the rear view of the vehicle. Reverse camera now, all damaged, of course. But something else that's interesting about these Western tanks and these NATO tanks is their weight. They have huge weight compared to Soviet design tanks and Russian design tanks. So the weight issue makes them quite unsuitable, really, for the type of combat that's been seen in Ukraine with boggy ground. These tanks, the Leopard and the Abrams, which we're going to have a look at now, were really designed for a war against the Soviet Union in the Fulda Gap in Germany over basic prairie land, a full-scale armor-to-armor conflict, really. That was the ideology behind their design. Hence their weight wasn't such an issue, supply lines to the front. And they were, of course, designed to be used in combined arms combat. And these tanks in Ukraine aren't being used in combined arms combat at all. You often see Leopard tanks, and you've seen Challenger tanks, British Challenger tanks, and of course the Abrams, which we're about to have a look at. We've seen them on their own, completely unsupported by infantry fighting vehicles, unsupported by infantry. And these tanks, as I say, were designed to have huge amounts of infantry support air support, combined arms warfare, which is the modern, well, it was the idea of modern warfare prior to the onset of the conflict in Ukraine. Well, this phase of it. So this has really shown these tanks' vulnerability, not only to drones, but to infantry. And we're going to have a look now at this Abrams tank, which is here, and it's in a pretty sorry state. Irlandia, Ireland. Yeah. So let's have a look at this Abrams. People are, of course, interested when they hear me speak in English. They want to know where I'm from. So here's the Abrams. Okay, let's have a look. So this isn't exactly the advertisement for an Abrams tank that the American military would like you to see, but you're getting an up close and personal look at it. This one is essentially destroyed. You can see it's 50 caliber Browning heavy machine gun on the top, completely burnt, still in position. You can see its anti-drone grills, or grills that were there near the smoke discharges at the front. I presume as part of a defense system of some sort. There's extra track hanging on it. You can see the comms antenna, and also what looks like a GPMG or a 7.62 millimeter gun with some protection for the gunner up on the top of the turret. So let's talk a bit about the Abrams tank. Okay, so again, I'm not an absolute expert in armor, but the Abrams tank has been around a long time, much like the Leopard in various forms. So what does it cost? An Abrams tank, probably in its basic M1A1, the first Abrams, probably cost about $4 million. This one, I'm not sure of the actual specifications on this tank. We'll have a look when I get closer to the, it's hard to tell. But these could cost up to $10 million each. And you guys pay for it. This is your tax dollars. The Leopard next door, the Marder, and this tank. But again, the vulnerabilities are shown here. This tank definitely looks like a mid-ranging variant. Now remember, the West stripped out a lot of the technology from when they brought them to Ukraine. And so a lot of the high-tech sites and any sort of technology that was believed to be vulnerable to ending up in Moscow, which we didn't think would happen, of course. Well, the West didn't. Was stripped out of these tanks, and probably rightly so, probably the right decision. But again, the vulnerabilities and the practicalities of modern war are demonstrated here as well. Things like the landmine, things that many sort of strategic analysts would have thought weren't that important now in fluid modern warfare prior to the conflict in Ukraine. You can have a look and see what a landmine has done to this tank, and you can see the running wheel, the track has been completely detracked. The running gear has been shattered completely. And you can see on the bottom here, the cables have been torn through completely, and the tank is burned, and the main drive wheel at the back is completely destroyed as well. So this tank looks like it was destroyed by a basic Soviet era anti-tank mine. And so you've got maybe between a $6 and a $10 million tank on the variant, destroyed by something that probably cost a couple of $100 in real terms to buy. And remember, the Russians laid literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of anti-tank mines and built anti-tank obstacles, as we know, last year in anticipation of this widely telegraphed and telegrammed and advertised Ukrainian counteroffensive. I mean, the idea of advertising that oncoming offensive was so ludicrous. Even just telling the Russians and everybody else that they were going to go through Tokmak, the exact route of attack, and they actually followed through on that, coming through Zaporozhye, a place like Robotina, where tanks like this piled up alongside their Leopard German counterparts. So kind of a ludicrous behavior to drive these type of machines as part of individual small strategic assaults, no air cover, no real command and control, tanks following tanks onto the same minefield. And we've seen famous photographs of that. And this actually looks like one of those vehicles. Now, it also looks like it took a hit to its turret at the side, now that I look at it from another angle. And some of the armor, maybe it was reactive armor on the side. You can see the damage there. So it looks like it was struck by either an RPG or possibly a Coronet anti-tank missile, which destroyed the first layer of armor. I'm just going to move around to the side, to the back of it, and I'll just show you guys a little bit more. So it's an M1A1. So as I said, this is the most basic version of the Abrams tank. Highly unlikely that this tank would be deployed by a European or American army in theater, because it wouldn't be seen as sufficiently armed or armored. I'm not sure of the gun. They started out with a 105mm gun, and they were upgraded to a 120mm gun. Yeah, so this is an upgraded gun. So it's a 120mm gun. It's a powerful gun, very powerful. Remember, the most powerful tanks in World War II, like the Tiger, had an 88mm gun. So this is a 120mm gun. The more modern tanks have even bigger guns. As you can see, an M1A1. You can see that the plate steel, which has just been shattered as you have a look. And up on the rear, which is the ammunition compartment at the rear of the tank, the rear of the turret, you see the low slung turret. Quite a small gun. It's quite a small vehicle, really, when you see how close it is to the ground. But you can see the, of course, the shrapnel damage on the rear sort of ammunition compartment as well. So that's the Abrams. So moving along to the next contribution from Washington to this lovely display for the citizens of Moscow and Russia. We've got one of these engineering vehicles, which is quite remarkable. These are probably some of the most valuable and important vehicles that
Sorry for interrupting you. Can you give us a small interview?
When I'm finished my stream, I'm just streaming to the US.
How many minutes?
15 minutes.
15 minutes.
Yeah. Let's do it. So these are probably some of the most important vehicles that you're going to see. And these are the M88A1, which are engineering vehicles, exceptionally important, and were exceptionally important to the Ukrainian counteroffensive. Now, they were destroyed, of course, as everything else was destroyed during that counteroffensive. But have a look at these vehicles. These are exceptionally important. They're recovery vehicles, and they're exceptionally big, powerful machines. Have a look at this. You can see the huge winch hoist on the top. And again, you can see how old these vehicles look. These are old pieces of equipment. You can see that. You can, it's patently obvious from the, the paintwork, the patina on it, that you can see that these are very, very old vehicles. So the idea that the West is giving Ukraine, high-tech and high-powered equipment with which to fight its proxy war against Russia, the idea of that is, when you see this stuff up close, the most modern thing on this tank is the flag that the Russians have put on it to denote its country of origin. And again, here you go. It's all in Russian. Of course, this is the big sort of plow at the front of it for, breaching obstacles. It's a breaching vehicle, basically, some smoke discharger, so you can see at the front the driver's position, I imagine. So a very powerful vehicle. But of course, powerful, but very old. And again, deployed in very small, very slipshod, sort of, ad hoc way, just won't and never was going to have an impact in this completely failed Ukrainian counteroffensive, which cost the lives, sadly, of hundreds of thousands of young Ukrainian men. More of a political act, probably, to try and justify the whole war, in my opinion. So we're going to move on. Now, this is an interesting beast in front of us. So this is the M1150 assault breacher vehicle, and this is based on the Abrams chassis. And this is a more modern-looking piece of equipment and a more powerful-looking piece of equipment than the M1A1. You can have a look at it here. So you can recognize the Abrams chassis, the Abrams turret. heavily armored at the front, and at the side, another additional element of armor you can see, which stands proud over some of the operating kit and equipment. A skirt at the side, an armored skirt, which is essentially rubber. It's not really going to offer much armored protection, as you can see. Some additional armor, which seems to have been placed, and you can see here, you can see desert livery, if you like, as the military would call it. Livery is the delivery of the color of the machine. The drab olive, which is the standard color, has been replaced by desert colored additional armor plate, and that again suggests a lot of this stuff has been cobbled together. These replacement panels are from a desert deployment. They're not from a European deployment, because you can see from the green color. So again, you can see that a lot of this stuff has just been cobbled together and sent to Ukraine. And what happened to the men driving them is utterly irrelevant. So it's an interesting fact. You can have a look at it there. You can see the different color as opposed to the green. The green and black is the European livery, and the desert camo at the front. Again, the actual breaching blade at the front is also in a desert livery, as you can see, maybe deployed in Iraq, Afghanistan. So it's quite a cynical game being played, which is lots of little telltale signs as to just how important this conflict is to the guys in Washington who are funding it and making a lot of money from it, of course, as well. So let's move on. There's the rear of this assault breacher, a big machine, big heavy machine. And of course, it's been detracked at the rear. So I'm just going to move around, and we're going to try and do some of the lighter vehicles now. So why not start with our old friends, the core blimies, the Brits. So this is a vehicle that will be familiar to a lot of people from Ireland, from the north of my country. And this is a Saxon, a British Saxon armoured vehicle. Now these are old vehicles. And as you can see, quite a cumbersome looking, awkward looking machine. And the Saxon armoured vehicle is essentially completely obsolete. Very light armour, very poorly armed. And again, I suppose that makes it an ideal candidate for dumping into Ukraine. Now, let's look next door. A lot of military personnel here. Now, some of the Ukrainian vehicles. I think that's a Bushmaster. Sorry, this isn't Ukrainian, of course. This is a South African origin. And interestingly, it has the insignia of the Kraken battalion. Now, the Kraken, of course, are a very infamous far-right group in Ukraine. Much like Azov, Kraken and some of the more ideologically, let's say, enthusiastic military groups in Ukraine have received some of the better equipment. Kraken being among them, Azov as well. You can have a look here. Interestingly, on the driver's side window, you can see small arms damage. Okay, it's called the Mamba. It's just an MRAP, basically. This looks like a Cossack. Can't actually get down that far to see the Ukrainian one. But sorry guys, I'm just going to bring you down here towards this one. This is interesting. It's a big machine, probably one of the biggest machines, profile-wise, height-wise, at the display. I think it's a Kirpi. I think it's a Turkish Kirpi MRAP. Now, when you see the size of a Soviet or a Russian tank, and you see the profile, the low profile of the more modern equipment, and then you see the huge profile of a Kirpi. I think it's a Kirpi, isn't it? They're absolutely huge. I mean, I'm 6'6" tall. And what you can see is the size, the profile of these MRAPs, or protected sort of infantry vehicles, is remarkable. Very lightly armored, really, as well. More or less designed to give some protection with the high profile. You can see the large gap between the base of the vehicle, and the bottoms of these vehicles are usually in a V shape to deflect blast from mines outwards away from the main cabin of the vehicle. Again, this vehicle would have been designed for use in a Middle Eastern type of area. They're not really designed for a European war. And the profile makes a hugely accessible target, if you like, for any anti-tank gunner or any tank scanning the horizon. These are incredibly tall. This must be nearly 3 meters tall, which gives a huge target for any infantryman or anti-tank team or any armor capable of destroying it. And probably hundreds of this type of vehicle have been destroyed in Ukraine. Now, we're going back to the States from Turkey. And this is the YPR, which is an up-armored, slightly upgunned, well, it's not upgunned at all, actually, because it still only has a 50 cal Browning machine gun in it. But this is an American vehicle, which was, I think, upgraded by the Dutch. The YPR, the M113 was the original chassis, if you like, with extra armor built onto it. We'll find an M113 right beside it, actually, now, and we'll show you that. But this is the YPR 765. So you can see it has additional, some additional armor on it. Now, literally, dozens and dozens of these have been destroyed in Ukraine. They're very unpopular, I believe, with the Ukrainian forces that are asked to ride in them. Hence, that they prefer to actually ride on top of them, because they form a very deadly sarcophagus if they're struck, as did the M113, the Zippo, or the Sherman was probably a Zippo, but this also was called similar. So you can see this is the YPR, an upgraded variant. Again, you can see the age of this equipment. Exceptionally old. I mean, it looks like this kit, it looks like something that you would find in a collection, an old museum. This is very, very old. You can see the layers and layers of paint that have been painted onto this stuff. So when you see European politicians proudly saying that they're going to donate, 100 APCs to Ukraine, you'd imagine that this equipment would be, viable, it would be strong, it would be workable. Can you imagine operating one of these machines, maybe 50 years old, miles and miles and miles, hundreds of miles, kilometers from any sort of real engineering backup, from fuel supply, completely unreliable, and then sent out across some of the most formidable defenses ever created since the Second World War by the Russian military, which is exceptionally well equipped, as we know, for anti-armor operations, Ka-52 helicopters. Imagine being sent, after being conscripted, in one of these and being told, off you go, boys. It's a terrifying prospect, and sadly, tens and tens and tens of thousands of young Ukrainian men have died in vehicles like this. And when you see the utterly inoperable state of some of this equipment, you can just see from the patina on it. Even the road running tracks are completely missing on the vehicle. Cracks in the armor, which were there before this was delivered, I would imagine. You can see that this stuff is being dumped into Ukraine. And dumped into Ukraine so that the American bosses can probably replace it. The military-industrial complex then feeds the machine vast profits again and again. So it's a washing machine of money. And sadly, this is the type of shitbox that men are expected to go to war in. Absolutely remarkable. And here's its older brother, the M113. I think these first saw service in Vietnam, really. So this is another ancient piece of equipment. It's essentially a steel box. You can see the thickness of the armor. It's basically a few millimeters of steel, which might stop small arms. It might stop a medium machine gun, but it's not going to stop anything else. And if anything else penetrates that, like an RPG, or God forbid, a Cornet anti-tank missile, everything inside this thing is cooked immediately. There's no way out. And hundreds of these have been sent to Ukraine. Hundreds and hundreds of these have been sent to Ukraine. And dare I say it, thousands of young men have died in them. For what exactly? It's another day's work. So this is the M113, a veteran of Vietnam, Korea. Many of you guys in your 50s and 60s and 70s will recognize this piece of kit. It's got a hastily added anti-tank mesh welded to the front of it. It's kind of scrapyard challenge kind of stuff. And of course, in the battlefield, you've got to innovate. You've got to do what you can do. I mean, the Russians are doing it at the moment with Tsar tanks and Turtle tanks. Very interesting stuff. Whatever you do to defeat this huge drone threat, which has completely transformed the battlefield in Ukraine, you got to do it. But you know, when you see the sort of, it's very sad to see the state of this equipment. Look at the running tracks. And again, you can see the patina, the age of this equipment. Absolutely remarkable. Now, in addition to being a dumping ground for the West's military junk and a Ponzi scheme basically to sell and flog vast amounts of military equipment from the United States, which most of this 61 billion that they told us is going to go to Ukraine is going to be going to 80% of it will be spent in the United States, and 30% of that will go into the profits of big weapons companies. So it's a washing machine. In addition to that, Ukraine has also become a laboratory for other untested modern weaponry. So the idea of shutting down that conflict early or trying to find peace isn't as attractive to the military-industrial complex, because there is an opportunity to trial and test some more modern equipment. And here's a piece of slightly more modern equipment. It's a British Husky MRAP light sort of infantry tactical vehicle, if you like. Here it is. Again, as you can see, it makes absolutely no sense to send a vehicle in that livery onto the steppe of Ukraine. A mustard-colored target rolling across the grasslands of Ukraine. Absolutely ludicrous. So you can see that this stuff was deployed so hastily, and it sort of signifies something about the whole Western political reality when it comes to the Ukraine war, that they're deploying desert-colored vehicles, as you can see, which you can see a mile away, even among all the rest of this olive drab material. What stands out? And I mean, to a gunner in a modern T90 or T80 or T72 upgrade, you're going to see this thing a mile away. And unfortunately, anything inside it's going to pay the price. Now you can actually see, it looks like a small arms round, or maybe a 12 millimeter. I don't even think, it pierced the front of the bonnet there. And the bonnet's just made of fiberglass. There's actually no armoring on it. Check it out. Now, the ballistic glass at the front has offered some protection, obviously, to the drivers. You can see various calibers of Russian weapons have hit it. That looks like a 12.7 millimeter heavy machine gun round in the here, which hit the windscreen wiper, and then the rest looks like 7.62. But again, the protection offered by these things is at least minimal. They look pretty mean and pretty tough, but when they come up against a modern peer adversary, there's nothing really to see. It's just remarkable. Now, this is a vehicle that you guys will have seen a lot of in various videos and very dramatic footage. These are deployed usually again in these what are seen as elite battalions and groups in Ukraine. That's the Max Pro. The Max Pro Plus, which is an MRAP. Now, this looks like a mean piece of kit, doesn't it? Again, very much like the Turkish Kirpi. It's got a very high profile, and that's not about being inconspicuous in the landscape. It's about keeping the chassis of the vehicle up and away from a mine if a mine is hit, the high wheel arches, etc. Now that gives it a very high center of gravity, which makes it easy to turn over in some contexts if it goes into a ditch or into a shell hole, which many have done. But it also is exceptionally easy to hit from a long distance away. Remember, modern Russian battle tanks and anti-armor systems can destroy any Western supplied armor from many kilometers away in any conditions and at night. And this thing is not something you want to be in when that occurs, as it just makes a giant whopper of a target in any gunner's sight. Absolutely remarkable. And this particular Max Pro is in absolutely pristine condition. It looks like it was abandoned or captured at the rear. Even the tires are in great condition. Again, these were developed for occupation forces, basically, for wars against the Afghans, the Iraqis, insurgent warfare, because they're very lightly armored. These weren't developed or designed to combat main battle tanks of a peer adversary. So I'm going to do one more.
How many minutes more?
So I'm going to do one more, guys, because I got to get moving. And I'm going to pick out what we're going to do. So I don't really want to do a T-72 because we've seen it. But hey, I think what we should do is some Ukrainian armor. I think this is a Bucephalus or a BTR. Yeah, it's a BTR 3E, which you'll have seen a lot of. So this is a BTR 3E, but I want to talk about the CV90. Now, I'm like a kid in a candy shop. So this is the CV90. This is a Swedish armored vehicle. Now, it's a kind of a hybrid between a tank and an infantry fighting vehicle. Very interesting vehicle, very good vehicle, very modern, and quite a powerful vehicle. And several of these have been, again, supplied to Ukraine, and several have been destroyed and captured. So let's have a look at it. So there you go. That's the CV90, a Swedish sort of hybrid. More of a tank, in my view, than an infantry fighting vehicle, but it does have a compartment that can carry several infantry in it as well. Now, what's interesting about this is it has a 40mm Bofors gun at the front of it. Now, Bofors are a Swedish armaments company, renowned for their anti-aircraft guns from the Second World War and beforehand. But you can see the size of the Bofors gun, a very, very powerful gun. But that doesn't necessarily make it a very good vehicle to use in Ukraine, because if you look around at all the other weapons that Ukraine is using, most of them use either 20mm or 30mm guns. Okay, so when you've got these 40mm shells, they're quite hard to source, quite hard to find, and again, you're many, many miles from any sort of combined arms setup. So it's a very tricky thing to manage and operate. And this one, it seems to have been struck at the rear of its turret, probably by an RPG. I've seen one that was hit right under the lip of the turret and the body of the vehicle, which was destroyed. The gunner was killed. I saw that. I saw a film of that. But this one seems to have been struck at the rear, and it's in fairly good condition. And it's also bearing this matting on the front, which is meant to give it, decrease its signature, I think, for anti-heat or night operations, as far as I know. But an interesting looking vehicle. Yeah. And of course, here's a BTR with a combat module, 30mm gun on the top. A Soviet vehicle upgraded and up by the Ukrainians. And this is a Cossack to finish. Looks like a Cossack. Well, it's a version. Again, these MRAPs made in Ukraine, but made for the export market. So, guys, I'm going to have to skip off now, unfortunately. Hopefully we can do all these again. Thanks for joining. Thanks to DD and the guys for asking me to come on and show you around. I hope it was interesting. And from Moscow, for now, I'll sign off.